Good evening. Tonight, pro-peace, pro-life, pro-brilliance. And here's Ted with the rundown.
Tonight on Webster, being born a gifted child can often cause more problems than some of the advantages it brings. Webster looks at the mixed blessings of being born a prodigy with Joyce Juntune from the National Association of Gifted Children. How much do teens worry about how adults are running the world? More than we think. Later tonight, Webster speaks with two teens on a cross-Canada speaking tour to heighten nuclear awareness amongst their peers. But first, while BC's abortion rate accounts for 25% of the nation's total, only 1 out of every 5 adoption applications in BC are successful because there just aren't enough infants. Will the pro-life movement gain momentum under a Catholic premier? In the studio with Webster, Molly Kelly, an American advocate for the pro-life movement.
Molly, you're the executive director of Pennsylvanians for Human Life.
Right.
And you know you're in a country now where the majority of citizens and all the major political parties approve abortion in our present state. And we have a man called Morgentaler who 5 times has been acquitted of charges which patently broke the law because the juries will not convict an abortion. And he wants freestanding abortion clinics. Now, that's what you've got in the States now, isn't it?
We sure do. We have many. In fact, most of the abortions that take place in the United States are in freestanding clinics. And we do 1.5 million abortions a year.
How many of these are teenagers?
420,000 teenagers aborted last year. 1/3 of all our abortions are done on teenagers.
Well, surely the answer, part of the way, is education and contraception in the schools.
I think education's an important thing. I think contraception merely condones it. I think when you're giving a kid a contraception, you're saying do it but don't get caught. It's interesting that the more contraception we give out, the more family planning clinics we open, the higher the abortion rate, the higher the teen pregnancy rate.
Now we're in the middle of another problem, though, which to many people, including myself, would seem to require some considerably detailed education, and that's sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS. Surely that must become a priority, even in your mind.
Oh, yeah. The answer I have would take care of it all. The answer...
Abstinence.
Chastity, yep.
It doesn't work.
Oh, it does work. You're saying the person doesn't work. Chastity works. Abstinence works. If you don't do it, you can't get pregnant.
That's right. If you don't do it, you can't get pregnant. And if nobody ever did it, we'd have no problems whatsoever at all in the future, right?
Well, see, I think that our young people, I deal mostly with teenagers, and I think they're worth the truth, and I think they're up to the challenge. I just am now coming from 3 schools right here in British Columbia.
What
3
kind
assemblies.
Of reaction did you get?
Super reaction. I mean, I hope some of the kids are out there listening. I mean, standing ovations. And I'm simply challenging them to sexual responsibility. I'm saying to them, you are worth the truth and up to the challenge. There's contraception out there. It's not my mission to go get it off the shelves. It's my mission or my wish to say to them how powerful they can be, that control comes from within, not from without.
But you do have a problem. With the best will in the world, you cannot avoid many abortions or many teenage pregnancies. How many did you say you had in the States?
We have 1.5 million abortions. We have 1.2 million pregnant teenagers.
1.2 million?
Pregnant teenagers, right.
And of those, 420,000 had abortions.
That's right.
So you've got to find homes and, what is your attitude towards the 12-year-old, not uncommon, the 13-year-old who becomes pregnant and who does not have an abortion?
Well, we who believe in life are also called to then reach out with answers, credible answers. We've got to have a lot of good counseling system. We have to have shepherding homes, host homes. I myself have had 5 young girls live with me, each one for 6 months. We have to put our money where our mouth is while they were having the baby.
And then do you encourage the youngster, no matter what age, to maintain her position in life as the mother of the child?
I think that it's extremely important to have good counseling for each individual girl. There is no set answer. I think adoption counseling is something perhaps we're most lacking in. I think we've got to have our young people understand that adoption is not only an option, it's certainly a love bond with the baby.
Some people would tell you that the difference between adoption and abortion, the psychological trauma, is perhaps worse for the adoption than for the abortion.
Well, I think without counseling, there certainly can be trauma as far as forcing a girl to give her baby up or not getting her any counseling at all. But if she had good counseling, then she knows the baby's all right. She knows that she has given the baby the gift of a good family. With abortion,
well, she doesn't know for sure, does she?
Well,
she's been told by some social worker she's giving the child
it's
up
so
to a
hard
good
to
family.
adopt. It's so difficult to adopt that the families are definitely screened. There's no, I mean, you're going to get natural families out there that might not be good to the child, but for the most part, adoption families certainly are going to be good.
There are many families who should have adopted children who can't get them because of the stultified bureaucracies which think that an adoptive family should be clinically perfect.
Yeah, nobody's clinically perfect.
Now, in the United States, you've obviously lost forever the battle against pro-choice, legally speaking.
No. We're going to turn it around. We're going to win. I have no problems that we're going to be victorious.
You only have one federal statute.
We have a Supreme Court decision that 7 men legalized this, all right? Now there are only 5 men, all right? There's 4 pro-life justices and 5 pro-abortion. The 5 that are pro-abortion are 76 or older. I wish them no ill health, but if any of they retire or go on to their greater reward, and President Reagan is still in, he will name a pro-life justice, and the courts can reverse itself, and we could have abortion outlawed.
If Reagan lives long enough for these 2 daughtery old guys to die...
Well, maybe we have good people running. Kemp is pro-life. Dole is pro-life. We have pro-life candidates coming up. We have an election in 1988.
Not so many among the Democrats, though, as among the Republicans.
Right.
So therefore, to be a pro-lifer, if that's your proper title in the United States, the proper party to belong to is the Republican Party.
Well, that's the way it happens to be as far as presidential candidates, but we have a lot of good Democrats within the states, within the state legislation that is pro-life.
But do you not believe, you are a Catholic, I presume?
I am.
And
I'm also Irish.
And you got scores of kids?
I got 8.
8 kids, and you brought up 5 pregnant teenagers. No, you looked
I've had 5 other girls live within my home that were pregnant and not married.
Why should people who want the choice, you know the line, I don't have to give you the whole line,
right,
it's a woman's body, it's her life, it's her decision, it's under her control. Why should they not be allowed to have the abortions if they so wish?
Well, because abortion is the destruction of human life. They can call it anything they want, but they're making a choice for another human being, and their choice is to pay a physician to destroy that unborn child. If I see someone abusing a child, just because it's their child doesn't mean that I can't enter into it. If I know the neighbor is slapping their kid around, then it's my obligation to tell somebody about it.
So you're totally dogmatic on that. You don't believe there's freedom for other people to...
I don't believe there's freedom to destroy human life.
For other people to have views opposed to yours, in that a fetus at a certain stage is not a human life.
Nobody questions that. If I had the leader of the pro-abortion movement sitting right here with me, there's no way they'd say it wasn't a human being. We can do surgery on the unborn. We have ultrasound. I
know, but they don't call it a human being.
Oh, they do.
Right or wrong.
Oh, Jack, they do. They call it a human being. They
call it a fetus.
Well, fetus is a human being. It's a Latin word. It means young one.
And their only concern, I think, that reminds me of another question. Here, I hope I've got this right. The abortion must take place...
In a hospital.
No, in a hospital.
Therapeutic committee.
Therapeutic committee and all the rest of it.
Yep.
And of course, not all hospitals do it. There's discrimination about it. And it can't be done after, 20 weeks?
Well, it's my understanding that you're pretty much the same as us. It's supposed to be held within the first 20 weeks, but you have a broad definition of health, like we do. So that if after the 20th week, the woman's health is endangered and by the pregnancy, and her health is to include physical, mental, social, psychological, and financial, then the therapeutic committee can say she needs it for her health, and it's legal all 9 months in your country and in mine.
And therefore you'll give me the picture of a human being being born and being put to death.
At any stage. The baby has all its parts at 8 weeks.
Well, I know that, but...
So it's a human being. We can't dispute the humanity of the child.
So you don't think that abortion should be used as, certainly shouldn't be used as a contraceptive device, but should not be legalized in any free country in the world?
Nope. It's a destruction of a human life. If a woman's life is indeed physically threatened because she has an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy forming in the tube, what do? You have to remove the tube. The baby will die. That's not killing the baby. That's removing something wrong with her.
Couple more standard questions. Probably the last time I'll ask it for a number of years, maybe. Rape, no abortion.
No, because it's a human being. The baby doesn't come out with rape written on its head. Baby doesn't look different. It's a baby.
The mother may have to bring up the child of a rapist.
But you're writing the ending. In other words...
Of course I am, because it happens.
Well, why couldn't that baby be put up for adoption? Why is that baby awful?
Next one.
Yeah, but it's not awful. It's a human being.
With today's scientific knowledge, of course, it can be told in advance where you may have a grossly retarded fetus in the womb. Surely, in the name of all humanity, the proper thing to do at that time, medically proven, is to abort.
Well, then we're saying that there is life not worth living. And we're putting our standards on it. Well, where do you go? How grossly? Does it have to have, you know, where do we draw the line? And who makes the decision? I believe in the beauty and the humanity of all human life, and we are called to reach out and help those people, not kill those people. It's much harder to love a handicapped child than to love a perfectly normal child that's not going to take as much of our time.
Are there not segments of society who are so poor and so uneducated, who breed continually, continuously, that abortion must save the mother's life at some time?
Only if the mother's physically life is threatened by a disease do we have to then do something to help her. As far as she's poor and she can't raise the baby, then to make her one step poorer by destroying her offspring is no nice answer.
But the baby may have to be destroyed to save the life of the mother.
What they do is if there's something wrong with her, if she has an ectopic pregnancy, or if she has, the only two reasons where you would do that would be an ectopic pregnancy or uterine cancer. Anything else, they would bring the baby to the point where it can live outside the womb.
Your calls to Molly Kelly, Executive Director of Pennsylvanians for Human Life.
Right.
After the break. Molly Kelly is here for the Provincial Convention of the BC Pro-Life Society in Langley, April 24 and April 25. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have something to say, and I have to say to the woman that I'm very much in favor of what she has to say. And my belief is that the heart begins to beat at the age of 3.5 weeks, and if you have men out there killing people, you charge them with manslaughter, yet you allow these women to go out and have abortions, and nothing is done. And what I would like to know is how your guest feels towards this.
She told you. She says it's murder.
That's right, and I'm really glad to hear that.
Okay? That was your answer, wasn't it?
Right. It's against the law. I mean, it should be
Not
against the law. It should be against the law.
Not against the law.
It's killing. It's not. You can't call it murder because murder is against the law, but it is killing. You end the life of the baby after the abortion.
If you believe in pro-life. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Jack.
Yes.
First, I'd like to welcome your guest here to Canada. Secondly, I agree with her 1,000,000%. I've had this discussion 1,000,000 times with 1,000,000 different people. It is murder to me. There's no excuse for it. Most times it seems it's just for the convenience of the mother that she doesn't want to give up 9 months of her life to have the baby. There are a lot of people out there.
Oh, that's a little simplistic. It's not done purely for convenience, is it?
Well, I feel that a lot of the time
In
I
our
think
country,
it is.
98% are done for socioeconomic reasons, not medical. 1/3 for inconvenience, 1/3 for financial, 1/3 on teenagers. So pretty much what he's saying is that it is not done for what you call the hard cases.
Go ahead, please.
Hi.
Aye.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to say I'm not really for or against it. I'm not a female, so I can't say. But even if it is outlawed, it's going to just go back into the alleys, and we're going to have a lot of innocent people dying that are just trying to get something.
We
that they
have a
want
lot of
done.
innocent
They
people
make up
dying
their
right
own
now.
Mind is their body. Now, the rights of the baby, I'm not arguing that. But,
But you make a
go
good
back in
point.
the alleys. We're going to have a lot more innocent people dying, and I think it's these religious fanatic people that are trying to make me or anybody else live
By
my
their
life
rules.
by them.
Fair enough. He's right on the kitchen abortionists, the backdoor abortionists, the hairpin abortionists, you know.
Well, if you're
We
against,
went
if
through all
something
that
is
for
wrong,
years.
well, how about drugs? Why don't we clean that up? Why don't we make sure that everybody gets clean crack or clean needles? In other words, drugs are outlawed, and just because people are going to go do it anyway, if we clean it up, you can't do that. Killing is killing.
If it's done properly under the law of land,
One person still dies. If it's done properly, yet you still have one death. If the baby doesn't die, it comes out alive. There's been abortions that haven't worked.
Oh, of course I have.
Sure. So we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but all the point I'm making is we have a law, and the law is properly followed, and the only way it can be changed is not by dogma, but by the government.
Well, and by the people speaking out. And that's really what we're doing, and that's why this is good. People speak out.
Go ahead, please.
I would just like to tell a lady that she is like a breath of spring, and I hope she never stops letting her light shine.
Thank you.
Hey.
Go ahead,
thank you.
please.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to, first of all, welcome Molly to Canada and Vancouver, and to tell her how thrilled I am to have her. I'm the mother of a 1-year-old son.
Hey, good.
And I just want to tell you how pleased we are to have you in your pro-life views, because our society is so anti-life. They call themselves pro-choice, but really I feel that they are anti-life.
Thank you, ma'am. You're getting nothing but supporters.
Good call, Faye.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm another supporter. I'd just like to welcome you to Canada and keep it up, you know. And Jack, I also like to thank you for allowing the pro-life view to be presented as in counter.
You don't have to thank me for that. I always have attempted to balance my programs, even if I disagree violently with the views of some of the guests. Go ahead, please.
Yes, here we go. We have another American in a foreign country talking about a situation in a country that is not ours. I'd like to know what your position is on your government sending people into Central America and murdering adults and children in those countries.
Very opposed to it.
You're opposed to that.
That's
Okay,
right.
why don't people like you, Jerry Falwell, the whole clan, always speak out against it? I never hear people taking stances.
It would take every single day of my life to go speak out of every single injustice. I'm the mother of 8 children, and my priority is to be home with my 8 children. And if I can take time away from them, then my priority and my expertise is to go to reach teenagers and to say to them that abortion destroys a human being, it's harmful to their body, and that they have power within themselves to make their own decision, and chastity is a good way to go.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would just like to say that counseling has got to be one of the most important things when it comes to a pregnant teenager. I adopted my child out 11 years ago when I was a young teen, and counseling was very nil, very little, quite sad. And because of the emotional impact it had on me years ago, I'm sure that I wouldn't have had as much guilt had I had,
Proper counseling.
proper counseling. Yeah. So
You're absolutely right, and we are throughout the States and Canada doing more and more of that. We have crisis pregnancy centers that are hooking up with professional counselors that are trying to reach the kids, because we know that counseling absolutely is necessary.
Go ahead from Chilliwack.
Hello, Jack.
Right.
Hi to your guest, Molly.
Hi.
And we in Canada seem to have a double standard. We're against capital punishment, yet we feel that we're within the law to take the life of an unborn child.
Just a minute, hold your breath on against capital punishment. There's going to be a key vote in the House of Commons sometime this year, which might go the other way. However, that's beside the point. Go ahead from Victoria.
I'd just like to thank Molly. I'm another supporter of what she's up for. Appreciate what you're doing. Also would just like to say that one of the signs of the pro-choice movement, how it's been revealed, is when the social credit government supported the mothers who would have the children so that they wouldn't have to do it for socio-economic reasons, yet they're still complaining. In other words, that wasn't the major problem. Now they're screaming that they're abusing their choice. So it just sort of revealed.
Well, that's a kind of difficult little local twist to get across to Molly.
Yeah, well, it just showed the hypocrisy locally of what's happening, that's all.
Thank you, but the Premier has promised extra money for counselling and whatnot for pregnant teenagers. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack. I would just like to say to Molly that she appears to be an expert in the child field, but yet the teenagers who are having these abortions, the reason they're having them is because it's proven that the teenagers that have these children, these are the children that are child abuse, and these are the children that get sat on burners.
No, that's not true. That's simply not true. Child abuse has risen ever since abortion's been legalized. In other words, the whole mentality of allowing abortion, that's even worse. As far as teenagers that are having children, they're not the great abusers at all. People that abuse children are emotionally sick, and they're going to abuse it whether they were going to have an abortion or not an abortion. That's simply not a true statement.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Molly. I saw you this morning at our school, which is Holy Cross, and I would just like to say our entire behalf of our school and my entire religious class, we're totally behind you, and we think you're doing a hell of a good job, and keep on doing it.
Hey, good.
My thanks to Molly Kelly from Pennsylvania, here for the Provincial Convention of the BC Pro-Life Society in Langley, April 24 and 25.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Jack.
you.
Appreciate
I'll
it.
be back after the break. Allowed to reminisce for a moment, when I was a politically active youngster many, many years ago in Scotland, my great desire was to fight militarily against the injustice of the rise of the Nazis in Spain. Totally different. It was the right thing to do at the time, believe you me, and the right attitude. Totally different couple here tonight. They are Desiree McGraw and Max Faille, and they're from Montreal. Now, tell me about your peace travels across Canada.
Well, it's called the Youth Nuclear Disarmament Tour, and it began at the end of this school year, and it's going to the end of May, and we're speaking to 1 in every 20 high school students in the country about the importance of nuclear disarmament and of getting involved in doing something about our future.
Are you a politically inspired movement? Do you belong to a political party? One
Not
must
at all.
ask that standard question.
Not at all. On the contrary, we think this issue is too important. It's got to rise above politics.
Who finances your trip?
We do our own fundraising. We receive grants, and our major grant came from Jeffrey Pearson, the Canadian Institute for International Peace and Security.
That's Lester's
son.
Lester Pearson's son. Well, he was a great peacenik in his day too, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
Now, do you not find that there is considerable apathy among the high school students to whom you speak?
We found that that's our largest obstacle. We found that in general, even before we go into the schools, the students agree with us on the issue, but the difficulty is convincing them that they, as students, can have an impact and a say in what their future is going to be.
And this is why they're apathetic, not because they don't care, but because they feel helpless. And that what we see our tour as doing is giving them ideas on what they can do within our Canadian democracy to make a difference.
Now, at the times of the Cuba crisis and the missiles aimed at the United States and these other ones, the whole world was in a panic on the verge of nuclear war. Nowadays, a child psychiatrist will tell you that nasty stories about the Wicked Witch will frighten children more than their thoughts about nuclear extermination. True or false?
Absolutely false. A study done at McMaster University concluded that 60% of Canadian adolescents think their lives will likely end in a nuclear war. 93% feel there's absolutely nothing they can do about that. It is the major concern of teenagers today, and this is what we're seeing on our tour. We've already spoken to 100,000 teenagers.
Yeah. 1 in every 25 have regular nightmares about nuclear war.
Well, how can you say 1 in every 25 have regular nightmares about nuclear war?
Well, this was a study that was done at McMaster
Well,
University
what
with
do you
7,500
Do
students.
children stand up
We
in
don't have
school and say, once in every 25 nightmares, I think about the end of the world by nuclear disarmament?
According to this study, one in every 25 students studied said that they did have regular nightmares about nuclear war.
Mm-hmm. Don't you think the peace movement was at one time turned off because everyone was so hard in the Soviet Union and the United States was regarded as the great hero and protector of the world, which many people still regard it as?
Sure, we don't. We obviously blame both superpowers for what they're doing on this issue.
Okay, tell me, I'm a high school student, and I don't care about nuclear war. Tell me.
You probably would.
Well, maybe I wouldn't. Tell me.
Okay, tell you what. Well,
Tell you
I
about
guess
how it could start, or?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't worry that either superpower would intentionally start a nuclear war. We're worried about false alarms that are happening 2 or 3 times a week on each side. We're worried about terrorist groups in countries like Libya. Those are our main concerns. We're worried what would happen in a crisis situation like the Berlin Wall or something like the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're not worried that either Reagan or Gorbachev would want to do it.
Well, I'm sitting in the back of the class and I'm going to say, nobody's going to be stupid enough to start a nuclear war. These guys are smart.
Absolutely.
And I don't believe, and I might say I don't believe Helen Caldicott, whom I happened to do a rerun yesterday, when she says that 6 minutes to wipe out the center piece of the Russian system.
Would you believe Paul Warnke, former Assistant Secretary of Defense of the United States?
Not necessarily.
Well, maybe it wouldn't take 6 minutes. Who knows? Let's not find out.
Okay. Now, are you getting these youngsters to join a specific organization?
We're asking them to start their own, and in 90% of the 300 schools we've been to, they have established their own groups, education groups.
What do you think would be the effect of a nuclear holocaust on the face of this planet Earth?
No one denies, I don't think it's necessarily the issue, because no one denies that a nuclear war would be incredible devastation. No one can know exactly to what extent it would be followed through, but as Desiree also said, the only way of knowing is by having a nuclear war, and we think that we'd rather avoid that. But no one denies, we're not here to say nuclear war is bad and saying that other people think nuclear war is good. That's clearly not the issue. The issue is how are we going to prevent nuclear war?
How can we?
Well, I think even that isn't as controversial an issue as people would like to make it out to be. Even the superpowers have agreed on many occasions that eventually we have to get rid of nuclear weapons. I guess the most historic event was in 1978 at the United Nations first special session on disarmament. Both superpowers, every member nation of the UN, including Canada, the Soviet Union, the United States, agreed humankind is confronted with a choice. We can stop the arms race or proceed towards disarmament or face annihilation. That's not the issue. The issue is, when are we going to do it? Are we going to wait for countries like Libya to acquire nuclear weapons? Are we going to wait for a terrorist group to blow up New York City to decide that nuclear disarmament is a good idea? Are we going to decide for more are we going to wait for more taxpayers' money to go down the drain on nuclear weapons? More radioactive waste to be produced? When are we going to do it?
And what's the way to do it?
The way will you start by stopping. You stop testing the weapons. It's called a comprehensive test bans. Both sides can know what exactly is going on the other side. Now, a lot of people think the major obstacle here is that they don't trust each other. Well, both superpowers have signed 17 treaties limiting nuclear weapons, not because they trust each other, but because they have the systems in place, like satellites and radars, to know what's happening on the other side.
What should a country like Canada do? We are a military subordinate of the United States, and we gleefully, not gleefully, but we allow them to test their cruise missiles, which are the really dangerous missiles of which the Russians are extraordinarily nervous. What should we do? Should we be joining a political party committed to unilateral disarmament?
No, not at all. Not at all. We don't even have to leave NATO. There's nothing in NATO that says we have to be involved in the nuclear arms race. That depends on how you feel. If you think that the nuclear umbrella of the United States and the Soviet Union of 60,000 nuclear weapons is protecting us, then yes, Canada should test the cruise missile. On the other hand, if you think that it's bringing us on the brink of destruction, then Canada's got to stand up and say, we're going a little too far on this.
But the answer I was looking for was a political answer.
Well, Canada can serve as a role as mediator, I guess, as it has always in the past. We can influence the United States, which is our largest and strongest ally.
We hope.
We certainly can.
We've
done it in the
haven't
past.
influenced them much lately.
Well, not lately, but just because we haven't done it in the past. I mean, I don't know how. I know I'll raise my children to believe that if at first you don't succeed, you try and try again.
I admire you, nevertheless. How old are you, Max?
18.
And I'm 17.
17. Are you going to be in the Walk for Peace this weekend?
We're leading it and speaking at it, yeah.
Saturday, April 25th, the 6th annual event starts at Kitts Beach at 11 a.m. Saturday.
Will you be out there?
I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be with you in spirit.
Okay.
My thanks to Desiree McGraw. Which school in Montreal?
Villa Maria.
Villa Maria. And Max Faille.
Collège Saint-Laurent.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
Best of luck.
And I shall be back after the break. My next guest must be gifted because she is Joyce Juntune. Is that right?
That's right.
Funny name.
Yes.
Joyce Juntune, Executive Director of the Association for Gifted Children, which is members all over the world, right?
That's correct.
Now, surely those with gifted children, such as you and I have, of course, never had any problem in recognizing their gifts, their intelligence, and having them properly cope with school and life.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
What are the facts of life about dealing with gifted children?
Probably two types of things come out. The first thing is that many parents don't quite understand giftedness. They're not sure what to do. Sometimes it frightens them because they don't know if they're doing the right thing. And then the same thing happens with schools. People in the school system do not understand what gifted children are like. We all live with preconceived notions of what they would be like. And actually, gifted people are not all people with briefcases and thick glasses with good memories.
But don't gifted children sometimes get bored stupid at school?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there any way whereby you know you have a gifted child?
That who may know? The parents know?
The parent. Yeah.
Usually what happens is if parents think that they may have a gifted child, they either go to a school system or to a psychologist and ask to have testing to verify what type of intelligence level, what type of thinking level, and so on that child has.
Can you identify a gifted child by clinical description for me?
by clinical description, I was going to say, first of all, you can't totally identify a gifted child by clinical description. What people normally look for are a couple types of things. They look for the level of innate intelligence. They look for the type of thinking ability. They look for the way the child looks at things, relationship thinking. They also usually look into the social emotional development, not because it has anything to do with whether or not you're gifted, but how you handle the ability you might have.
Because a gifted child might be so bored with his class that he become a discipline problem.
That can happen. I think maybe the hardest problem to worry about in giftedness is the discrepancy between where people are intellectually and where they are emotionally. Where an average child may be pretty close to the same. A gifted child could be 12 years of age, could be intellectually operating like a 16-year-old, could be emotionally operating like a 10-year-old, and put all that into a 12-year-old body and you've got trouble.
And do you separate them in the schools if it's going to be done ideally perfectly?
If you do it ideally perfectly, what you do is you plan the type of program that's going to match the child. The same type of program does not work for all gifted children. That's why you can't say, good, let's hire a teacher for gifted children, let's send all the gifted children down there and hope something magic happens.
You merely must identify them in the school and make sure that their potential is developed.
Well, when you identify, you do more than just say, I see ability. You look at what kinds of ability you see, what kinds of interests are there, and where are the needs and where are the strengths of that child. And it's different for different children.
But is this not a matter which has come under severe criticism, whereby you're trying to push your children ahead too quickly, away from the level of their peers? Okay. They don't want to be nerds or smart alecks, but if you push them on and push them ahead and you get a 12-year-old going to university, and it's happened, is that not very bad for that gifted child? Is it not better to let that gifted child develop itself in the normal course of events?
In good gifted programs, we do not push children. In fact, I will agree with you, there are parents who do push children. But in good gifted programs, basically what happens, you're looking at where the child is intellectually and what kinds of needs they have, but where they are emotionally and what kinds of needs are there. One of the gifted children said to me one time, which I think is very true, don't look at me for just my head on a table. Look at me for all of me. And I think that's a key thing in looking at developing giftedness is what are the kinds of things that are needed to help to develop and work on the potential that's there, not somebody else's preconceived idea of what that child should be.
But the overall system of education is not, as far as I know, geared for the gifted. Surely it's geared for the average common denominator.
Okay, it's geared for general. What we really look at in gifted is good differentiation, matching programs to students. I would say to you honestly that if a school district was perfect, which one won't have, but if they were perfect, they would have a lot of different levels of differentiation, of making different programs for different children. They'd be able to accommodate the differences that are there. I think all that happens in gifted education is to try to call parents and school districts' attention to the fact that here is an element of students that mostly are ignored, that very few modifications are made for. Oh, I would love it if they'd modify for almost every student. We wouldn't have gifted, we wouldn't have any type of special education.
Is there, I don't know if this is even a valid question, is there a correlation between the old IQ system and the gifted child?
Well, it's kind of funny. In the States, there's very little done with IQ testing anymore. Most places don't do it. It does tell you that there is some ability, but it doesn't tell you if it's nurtured. It doesn't tell you, what types of needs and so on. Now, if a parent says to me, my child has an IQ of 150, I don't say, oh, I wonder if they're gifted. Usually what I'll say is, what else don't I know about the child? But what we've found out is you have to have many types of measures in there. You can't just take one thing like a test and say that is a yes or a no.
And the gifted potential might remain unrecognized altogether.
Oh, absolutely. It isn't just innate ability, it's the nurturing. It's what surrounds that, what helps to develop the potential that people have.
Yeah, so all these little people have an emotional minefield which must be carefully nurtured. But I don't see how you can do special programs in the public schools for gifted children.
Where there are
especially nowadays when exams, or until recently, were less than anything other than just to pass on to the next grade, right?
Well, that's probably one of the reasons I spend a lot of time working with teachers in the school, helping them understand the types of opportunities they can provide for students in their classroom to give them a chances to think and use their mind and work with information and understand themselves better. So actually, the program becomes where you have someone who understands gifted facilitating learning as it matches that child.
If I'm a parent worried about my child's lack of progress or lack of recognition as a gifted child, how do I put it to the teacher?
Well, there's two things that are there. One of the things is I think the parent has a lot of responsibility in the home of things they can do for giftedness. I do not want to see parents immediately go and say to the school on any issue, it's your problem, you solve it. I think it's a partnership issue. And usually what happens, we'll say to the parent, you need to sit down and start to talk with the teacher and share with the teacher, these are the things I see, what do you see? Children act differently in different settings. They may act one way at school, one way at home, and so there needs to be some communication. Then you can start to say, what kinds of things can you do, what kinds of things do I need to do that help to make it happen? It's a partnership.
But the intellectual level of the child depends very much on the intellectual stimulus they get in their home, surely.
Well, that's part of it. It's innate ability, it's stimulus at home, it's circumstances surrounding. They've taken children from homes that are deprived homes by other people providing stimulus. They can nurture this ability, which is one thing that schools do sometimes.
Well, now, you're giving a workshop somewhere.
Tonight.
We have a thing on it.
Yes,
We'll put it up. Oh, there it is there. And meanwhile, I shall take calls to Joyce Juntune from St. Paul, Minnesota. National Association for Gifted Children, after the break. I've been asked to ask you, how do I know if I have a gifted child?
Oh, actually, I'll put it to you very simply. How's that? Very simply, the easiest way to tell gifted children, or the thing that parents look at most, is a child that thinks or processes information differently from their peers, that sees things and relationships with information that's differently. People like to think it's a test score.
You mean smart kids?
Well, kids that think differently. Now, smart, let's identify smart. Some people think smart is a test score. Smart is thinking. Now, smart is the way you think.
Yeah, smart is a quick response, an intelligent reaction.
And connecting things together, most people wouldn't connect.
And an ability to do things, too.
Yes, to see things others don't see.
Because not all kids are smart, are they?
Well, not in the way we're talking.
That's a cautious response, wasn't it? Do you think a teacher could ever say to mother, I'm sorry, your boy's a little stupid?
No, I don't think they'd say that.
Where are we? Go ahead, please.
Oh, I'd like to just comment on meeting the needs of the gifted children. I had two children who in gifted programming in the public school system that started this year. Previous to that, they were in another school system where my son was considered a troublemaker. Where we had school counselling, we had calls to the home every day. He's now in a program where 2 days a week he's involved in something completely different from the regular curriculum, where he uses his abilities, mostly self-motivated, and it's like having a different child. And I think that it's not just giving more of what we would call book work, but it's meeting that need, the emotional need, because they are different children.
The thing I think that you're bringing out that's extremely true is that if people understand giftedness, then they know how to nurture it. And I think that's where we get it with schools. Right. You understand it.
Well, it depends. Smart enough and bright enough to know how to nurture it.
Well, that's why teachers need training in what to do. Many people just don't understand.
See, I keep talking about parents, and you keep talking about teachers. Go ahead, please.
Oh, in the first place, I would like to thank your guest, Jack, about doing something about this problem. That is, in the past, what they used to do with brighter children would be to promote them more rapidly, to accelerate them. Now, of course, we've started up special schools and that sort of thing. And I think it's more mature and more proper the way they're doing things now. However, I'd like her to comment on one other thing, too, and that is the question of elitism. Is there any danger from that? And if there is, how that should be handled? Thank you.
The elitism is something that people can create if they want to, but by and large, if you work with gifted children from what are the needs, the abilities, the strengths that are there, and what does that child need to develop, you start to take away elitism. Elitism is when somebody else decides what they want you to have, and therefore we're special and don't you be a part of us. When I look at schools where they're looking at many ways to serve gifted children, where some children have modifications in curriculum, some children have independent studies, and everybody's not doing the same thing, people don't talk about elitism, because what they start to see is we're matching what a child needs to that child rather than having some super design program that we're shoving everybody through.
Well, I thought elitism simply meant choosing the best.
Elitism usually comes when people think somebody is getting a privilege they shouldn't have.
Go ahead, please.
Well, I was wondering about the idea of the confusion about gifted people versus the needs of society. And I think that gifted people have a different perception of society than we do, and that we should listen to gifted people.
Well, one of the reasons that I think there's a concern right now for developing the minds of gifted youth is because those are the people that can help us with some of the solving of problems of the future types of things. However, as one gifted child said to me one time, it can't be just us. It's got to be many of us working together.
But gifted people should be pushed on ahead and advanced, should they not?
Well, the reason we want to develop their abilities is because exactly that. They're our brightest resource that we have. They're a natural resource that needs to be developed. And it's very unequal in my mind to develop 3/4 of what's in the school and let the other quarter go undeveloped. That's quite unequal.
Is it possible to tell me which studies are most subject to gifted children, where they show best?
They're quite varied. Some will be gifted in one subject area, some will be gifted in many, some will be gifted in leadership, some will be gifted in the arts. I think that's the thing that's happening in giftedness that's wonderful, realizing the variations that are there rather than they're all going to be the same.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question about dyslexia. If the child has a tendency to be dyslexic, or there is, it is hereditary, could the child still also be gifted?
There's what's called gifted learning disabled. There are many gifted people that have learning disabilities. In fact, one of my nephews is exactly that way. And it takes a while sometimes to find them because the first thing that we see is their disability, and we get caught in that. So what we sometimes say, it's hard for children to have one label, let alone 2 or 3, and I think that's where the problem comes.
One of Canada's very best hockey players, who was certainly gifted in his physical coordination, had dyslexia and can still barely write his name, but the guy's brilliant mentally. So dyslexia as such.
Yeah. And there are several learning disabilities, and there are physical handicaps as well that people will have that sometimes make it difficult for people to look beyond and find out the functioning of the mind.
Go ahead from Kidmat.
Yes. Could you please tell me, what can you do at home for an academically gifted child if you don't see the programs in the public school system meeting their needs and avoiding just boring that child more at school by teaching them too much at home? When you say it's a partnership with the teacher, what is the parent's role in that?
In fact, if you look at it this way, that there's a lot of things that parents can do no matter what the school does. I look at the school as supplemental. I would say there's 2 basic things to look at, kind of rules of thumb. One of them is to nurture the interest that you see. And the child almost leads in a way. If they become interested in an area and if the family helps the child learn more about that area, but beware, because the child may change their interest a couple years down the road and the family must be willing to change. But nurturing the interest that you see, first of all, and secondly, helping the child to learn to like themselves and understand themselves. And therefore, when they do that, they are better able to risk going into another area that maybe they wouldn't take the direction to do.
Only the perfect parent can nurture the gifted child.
No, but good parenting is good parenting, and good parenting makes for good parenting with gifted as well as for any other child.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, years ago in Victoria, there was a program started, and they selected self-motivated children from the elementary schools, and they started in junior high at grade 7 a program called Viability Unlimited. Now, these children were not labeled gifted, but they had almost a free rein to do as they wished. And my daughter would go to the office and ask for a pass to leave school because she was researching something in the archives or in the museum downtown. She was allowed to do that. And the children in that program, Viability Unlimited it was called, they loved it. They They weren't labeled. They were allowed.
Okay, that sounds like a good concept, does it not?
Okay, there's two things there that I want to work on. One of them is the fact the label does nothing magic. The label only helps us have a commonality of communication that there is a group of students we're talking about. That's it. The second thing that happens, and I think people need to be aware of, what she is addressing is one kind of gifted. Not all gifted children are self-motivated. Not all gifted children have the skills to go on their own. Those that do, it's excellent when they can be freed up and facilitated to go in that direction.
Well,
but other gifted children
I just want
need
to
have it.
say how marvelous this was for the children. There was no group of more enthusiastic students in
Than
that.
those. Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I was wondering what teachers at a secondary level can do to aid the emotional and the social development of their students.
You know, that's interesting because teachers at a secondary level have the hardest time letting the content go. In fact, I was working with some secondary teachers today, and I kept saying to them, use the content as a vehicle to help children learn about themselves, to learn about the world, and to learn how to process information. The phrase I use with the students is it's what you do with the information that counts. Not what you know, but what you do with it. So I think that's what you want to have as your goal as a secondary teacher.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to welcome Joyce here and to congratulate her on her outlook. I hope that many, many people are listening because the idea of having gifted classes and classes for the other end of the spectrum, the exceptional children who have difficulties, has almost gone by the board in this beautiful land of ours. And it is a very, very bad thing.
There's another thing that comes from that. If you work with gifted children and you focus on developing their abilities, the spin-off is you raise the level of what happens in all of education in a school district because it gives you a different standard to work for.
Go ahead from Port Hardy.
Hi, I'd like to know what sort of programs there are for a 17-year-old that's gifted in the way of computers and that when teachers haven't noticed that. They've thought that he was just restless and the real problem was that he was bored with schoolwork.
Now, I'm not aware of what kinds of programs are available in your area, but I will say this, and I say it to many parents, that there are summer programs available, there are residential programs around the country. I also say to parents, look for resources close. Where is the next computer class? Where can a child be sent there? Many times universities offer things. That's why there are local associations, and I know that there's one that's sponsoring this tonight, that help to keep in touch with the resources in an area locally. So we usually have people either call our office in St. Paul or call their local people and ask where they might get in touch with those resources. That's one of those things parents can do.
Well, he's been kicked out of school because of this problem, and now he's just sort of looking for work, and I figured...
Well, it's now up to the parent to help the boy to find...
Well, to start to uncover where, like I said, where is a summer residential program? Where is something at the university?
Let's put up where you're speaking tonight, and the phone number might be on it. It is 684-1022.
And they can give you the name of the local person.
Well, no, you've been very good indeed tonight, Josh. Time for one quick call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. I think this is wonderful. I've been working on individual program plans with students for a long time, both with gifted students and with handicapped students. But what happens when the money is not available?
Ah, that's a universal problem on which we must end. And my thanks to Joyce Juntune. And I shall be back after the break. Foremost authority on the treatment of the morbidly obese through gastroplasty, stomach stapling, is going to be part of the program on Monday. And his name is Dr. S. Ross Fox, and it will be at 5 p.m. precisely.